Okay, well, my name is Jim Seibert. I work in general accounting, and I'm going to be sharing some information regarding account attributes. Passionate topic. So how was lunch? Good? Okay. I got the unenviable position of presenting right after lunch. So how many of you have fur children? Dogs? Cats? Both? Okay, so I happen to come into having 6 of them, and 3 of them are here. So the reason I put this up here is because, right after lunch, people are not usually attentive like this, but I want you to notice, look at the ears on Linus here. He's attentive, right? He's paying attention. We got Athena up here paying attention. Franklin, he rarely raises his ears, so that's kind of him paying attention. And then we have this. This was Athena. She's all kind of like food coma. So I understand if you're feeling this way, but I'm really hoping for this. So, all right, that's my humor for the start. So here are the things that I want to cover. Identifying accounting attributes and explaining how your KFS transactions figure into reporting. So now you memorize this. I'll just leave this up here for an hour, and you just study that, and we're good. This kind of represents, Laura mentioned this earlier, but this represents our complexity at the university. I'm not going to cover everything on here. I do have 400 slides and 4 hours. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff that's on here, and other presenters have been covering some things on here, and at some point, this will be on the web for, when you need to fall asleep at night and you want to read through something. So let's talk first about the full accounting unit, FAU. So whenever you do a KFS transaction, it requires 3 pieces. You have to have a chart, account, object code, and for those who want more reporting detail, you have the option of sub-account, sub-object, and project. The charts. So how many are from Davis campus? Chart 3. This is going to be interactive, by the way, because I don't want you falling asleep. So chart 3. Okay, how many are school of medicine? Chart S. Okay. How many don't know? Just kidding. So hospital, A&R. I know we got some A&R. Yes, okay, represented. Good. And then we got some plant charts for each of those respective locations. So for chart 3 and S, we have the plant chart of P. And then, where's our capital asset people? Back in the back. Got to recognize our staff over here for capital asset. So they're the ones who are dealing with the chart P, chart M, and chart N transactions that have to take place. All right. So when you're doing your KFS transaction, you have your chart, and you also have your account. Here are some characteristics regarding accounts. How many have more accounts than they ever thought they'd ever have? Okay. You can do something about that, So most of the accounts are created by you all as, how many are fiscal officers? Okay, I told you we're going to be doing a lot of interaction. So fiscal officers are creating accounts. Central office creates the balance sheet accounts for you. And so behind the account, there are lots of attributes that we're going to get into in a little bit. And then the third piece that you need for all your transactions is the object code. So those are created or maintained by us centrally. And the key takeaway here is that they define the type of financial transaction, and we use that when we do our reporting. Let's see. Oh, so they're also grouped into object consolidations, which we use when we're doing budgeting. I want to spend more of the time on the account. The chart and object are kind of less complex pieces to the presentation. So I'm going to skip here to the object code. So this graphic here basically tells you the different types of objects that we have. One of them being income. So most of the time when we're bringing, I can't always say always and never because there's always some exception, right? So most of the time, the money that's coming in from outside is going to be recorded as income. And the object code for that is 0060. If you are charging somebody, how many of you have recharge operations? So you charge Department A, charges Department B. So when you're doing that, you're recording your intake there as a recharge income object code, which is usually 3900. Now, when you are charging somebody else, the department you're charging, you're now going to use a recharge expense object code that is called an ES type. And I set all this stuff up for you when you do your recharge activity. But if we have an expense from outside, so you're going to a vendor and you're buying a computer, that object code is going to be an EX type object. So it's really key that we get, I know sometimes object codes aren't as easy to figure out, but if we get them in the right bucket, we're like, that's a success, okay? So this is pretty key to get them in the right bucket. And the common ones on the expense side are object code 8000. Anybody have any of that going on? 7215, services. So, those are the three elements that are required for everything, chart, account, object code. And then you got three that are optional, sub-accounts. How many are using sub-accounts? Wow, a lot of people. Anybody want to share how? Sure you do. How are you using sub-accounts? Somebody tell me. I'm sorry? Line of business, all right. Anybody else? What I'm trying to do here is, we have this unique opportunity being all of us at the university, because when you go to other conferences, there are other universities, you got colleagues over there, you may never see them again, but you're networking, right? Here, you're all together. You got a wealth of resources right here in the room. So if something comes up and I ask questions and someone says, hey, I'm using sub-accounts, and you don't know what the heck a sub-account is, and you want to know how you can use them, go find that person. Talk to them. Let's see. One of the nice things about sub-accounts and sub-objects you'll see is there's this bulk copy feature. Anybody use that? 1, 2, 2, 3. Okay, we're getting there. So what that feature is, I'm finding out a lot of people don't know about that feature. But let's say you have an account and it has 5 sub-accounts, and you want to use those same 5 sub-accounts across multiple accounts. Well, you don't have to create 5 new sub-accounts for the other accounts. All you do is copy it from one to the other. There's a little button when you set up your account where you can copy sub-accounts and sub-objects. Okay? Did I just lose like half the room there? Okay. All right, sub-objects. These are ways of detailing an object code. So we have this object code out there called 8000. You've all used it. It's pretty broad. And anybody using sub-objects to further break down their object codes? Nobody? Come on. Nobody? Where's Brad? Brad. Unix. You know. Unix used them all the time. Well, I know, but you were. But you were. Okay, so basically it's a way of further breaking down your object code. So one of the examples I use is in travel, right? 2000 is the in-state travel object code. And you may want to know details on, okay, well, what exactly was that travel? So you can break down your object code into car for car rental, LDG for lodging, etc. So that's just an example of how you can use sub-objects. You can also do the bulk copy feature, so you can apply those across accounts. The final element of the FAU, and this is an optional one, is a project. And there's some details on the project. How many of you are using projects? Someone want to give me an example? Yes, you do. Somebody. Faculty startup. Okay, anybody else? Okay, what she said. It was all that payroll stuff. Anybody else? I'm sorry? Location. Oh, county, right, because you're A&R. And that's how you do that. Okay. So what I wanted to mention is that, besides this long graph, is that you have, so there are 6 elements of the full accounting unit. The chart account object code are ones that we use in our reporting. The sub-account, sub-object, and project are ones that don't necessarily go directly into our reporting, but it's important for you all at your departmental reporting. Okay, just wanted to make that distinction. Okay, So when you do your KFS transaction, you have a chart, account, and object code. But that account has a whole wealth of information behind it. And one of the things that is behind it is the organization code. Because in order to set up an account, you need to know what organization you're going to put it in. So here are some characteristics regarding the organization. The key takeaway here is level 4 organizations are used in financial statements. And you're going to be using orgs in Aggie Budget. It's used in Ledger Review. And then there's this annual certification that takes place. So some of you, when you first come into a department, you may want to understand like how your organization is all connected, how it's all set up. And there's this nifty report in FIS Decision Support called, it's Report 50, and this is your organization hierarchy. So what I've done here is I've used, throughout this example, throughout my presentation, I'm using engineering as my example. And so engineering has organization code 2400. So on the input page, I put in 2400. And in the results, I get a nice snapshot of how they're broken down. How many have never used this report? A few of you. Okay, so maybe one of the takeaways is if you want to get a snapshot of what's going on in your department, you can run this. The other part here, I didn't run it this way, but you can see here that you have the option to show the accounts, which you can imagine if you have a lot of accounts, which a lot of you said you did, it's going to be a really huge report, and I didn't want to put all that up here because it'll be about this big. So, all right, so that's that report. So another attribute that's behind the account is this thing called the UC account, or those who have been here for a long time know it as the OP account. So some characteristics of the UC account. Those are created and maintained by General Accounting. They have some attributes that go along with them. So a lot of times I'll get a request, someone says, okay, I need a UC account I need a 4.4 UC account, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. So when I go to set that up, there are a whole lot of attributes behind the scenes that are all tied to that. So that number itself also has a lot of attributes behind it. And those attributes are listed here. Account group codes, we use them in Schedule B, higher ed function code, annual report code used in Schedule C, and then this, which fewer people know about, uniform accounting structure, academic discipline code are used in Schedule B. And Denny's going to cover schedules in his presentation, so I'm not going to go into very much detail here. So let's talk about this fancy UC account. So the UC account basically consists of 3 pairs of numbers. And the first 2 represent the higher ed function code. And that is the most critical piece of this whole thing, is making sure we get the right higher ed function code. So in our example, 6.2 is public service. That's PBSV. The middle 2 represents a school or college. And in my example, I'm using engineering. And then each department within engineering has a unique 2 digits on the end. And in this case, we have chemical engineering is 17. So I'm hoping that you're kind of familiar with what you have in your organization, and I can show you a little bit more about that. So another attribute behind the account, under the UC account, is the account group code, and some characteristics there. Summarizes similar UC accounts, and it's involved in the financial statement line items. So here's an example of account group codes. These are all for the expenses here, different types of expenses. And you can see the number on the left and what it represents on the right. Again, these are things that you're not necessarily going to directly pick, but when you pick the UC account, all these are underneath that. Higher ed function code classifies type of expense in an account, used for expense EX types, and allow for comparison across UCs and other universities. Here are higher ed function codes. So normally, I say normally because again, there's always exceptions, right? So sometimes I see a 40XXX UC account and I expect it's going to be instruction, and lo and behold, I find out it's academic support. So somewhere along the line, we got something crossed. But as we go to the new chart of accounts, the idea is to have all this be nice, neat, matched. So how many of you are using I don't know, you have public service activity. A few of you, some of you aren't sure. Okay, public service. How many have contracts and grants? Oh yeah, okay. How many have FINA, student financial aid of either, yeah, everybody's got that one, okay. So this is just a breakdown of how those are represented by UC account. Now, when we do our reporting, we're gonna do some consolidation of these. So here, when we do reporting, we take instruction and academic support, make that one category, and then the instruction side is instruction and UNEX, and the academic side is academic and library. So those are consolidated when we roll up. Student services and financial aid, it's the same kind of thing going on. Research, there's Ag Experimental Station, as well as just the regular traditional organized research. Annual report codes. What I would like to see is that we have something clean like this. So annual report code, chemical engineering has 3 different listings here. One is 4.4, one's 4.0, one's 6.2, and those all represent different higher ed function codes. So the 4.4 is research, 4.0 is instruction, and the 6.2 is public service. Over the years, what we've come to realize is that there's a whole lot of, like we have extra annual report codes that we don't really need. We have extra UC accounts that we don't really need. So part of our cleanup effort going toward the new chart of accounts is to work with departments to clean this kind of stuff up. Now this one's pretty straightforward, but not all of them are. And so we're gonna be working on that effort. Schedule C, just to tie this together. So the examples I had, there's chemical engineering, that's the instruction, and then their organized research is here. For that year, they didn't have any public service. The account I've been using is inactive right now, so they don't need that anymore. So they didn't have any public service under that particular UC account or higher ed, or ARC, annual report code. But this is just how it ties into the schedule, just so you understand how what you put in on your account, behind the account there's a UC account. That UC account has a higher ed function code and an annual report code, and that stuff is reflected on the schedules. Okay? So, and this screen just kind of puts them together. So the UC account number is here, and it's got an account group code, it's got a UAS code, it's got an annual report code. What we try to do is keep all these consistent, so you have a 6.2, a 6.2, and a 6.2 for these 3 fields. So in our perfect accounting world, that would be the way it is. They're not all matching like that, but the plan is to get them to be matching that way by the time we go to the new chart of accounts. Okay, so now we go on to another subject, which is the funds. And it was touched on a little bit earlier. I'm sure there's going to be more information coming out on funds, but you have various buckets of money. How many want more than you have? Yeah, okay. I ask these questions to make sure that you're not like nodding off. Okay, so you got general funds, contracts and grants funds. These are the numbers that they tend to begin with. The fund group, the fund numbers begin with these digits. Student fees, self-supporting, there's a bunch of other ones out there, but I'm not going to list them all. So funds are organized into sub-fund groups. Here are some examples, and in this example that I'm bringing along, this account up here, there's a private contract. That's one of the sub-fund groups. Here are some other examples. The sub-fund groups then become part of some sub-fund group types, so it's a broader bucket, if you will. And there are some examples. And all this stuff is explained on this website. And an interesting note is that Davis is the only campus that uses sub-fund group types for Schedule D. Riveting trivia, I know. So we're going to look at a scenario here. You work in the chemical engineering department in engineering. Faculty members received a private contract for public service. You're asked to set up an account. There's the org code, there's the fund number. Now you need to determine the UC account. How do you guys go about doing that? Besides calling me. Because I know that was a good set. Okay, So we know it's public service, so the first two digits have to be a 62. But then you can determine the rest of it by checking what your department already uses. And one way you can do this is to use another report that's in decision support. This is the FIS 11. How many have never used FIS 11? A few of you, okay. So it's kind of hard to see from here, but so what I did was what I advise people to do is you run your FIS 11 by your OR code to see what your UC accounts are that you're using. Oops, sorry, wrong button. We're not there yet, okay. So over here, we see 40, 44, 40, but interestingly, we have these digits on the last four digits, right? So this is school or college, this is department. But we're looking at the higher ed function code, 40, 44, 40, right? We don't have a 62, right? So that's usually when I get the email that says, I need a 62 UC account, can you set it up? Well, when that happens, it's helpful for you to also let me know. Well, I always ask you what the org is, and I go in here and figure this out. But if you know what your last four digits are, that's helpful because then I can just add a 62 and set that up for you. So again, you may go back to your offices and run this report and find out it's not so nice and clean like this, but that's part of our cleanup effort, new chart of accounts. Okay, so best practices. When you're creating a new account, some people will create them from scratch, and other people will say, hey, I've got an account, I'm just gonna copy it. That's all fine, as long as you change the pieces underneath that need to be changed. So I've seen, let's see, if you're going to be copying an account, it's better to copy one that has already a lot of the attributes you're looking for. So if you have an expense account and you're trying to create an expense account, copy an expense account. Don't copy an expended balance account because it's got way different attributes under there and it's not gonna match up. So if you are going to copy, make sure that you change the attributes underneath. One being the org, one being the UC account if you need to, the fund, of course. Description, I get this all the time where someone will copy an account but they won't change the purpose. So I think you got two accounts for the same thing. Changing UC accounts and funds. So the most common thing that I see is people will set up an account and then like 3 days later, I see an account document come through to change the UC account. And that's usually because they're working with another department like grad studies or something, and they said, oh, that's not supposed to be an undergrad FINA account, that's supposed to be a grad FINA account. And so, and that's fine, I can make those, those come through and I can approve those changes. Where it gets tricky is if you're trying to change a UC account for something from a prior, that's had activity in a prior fiscal year. And even then, it's case by case. Typically, if we're changing like from one public service UC account to another public service, that is more likely to be okay because it's still the same higher ed function code. It's still public service. But if you're trying to go from 4.4, organized research, and all of a sudden you want to say, oh no, it was never really organized research, it's supposed to be public service, that kind of thing we don't usually allow. And so then you'd have to set up a new account instead. So the time period for that is usually from one fiscal year to the next. An exception being, let's say it was set up 2 years ago and you never used it. Well, if you never used it, we never reported on it, so you can change the UC account and that's fine. But now let's talk about the fund. So we also occasionally see this, where someone sets up an account and they assign a fund to it, and then they have charges and stuff, and 3 months later they want to change the fund. We also can't do that. We used to have more flexibility in changing that, but a lot of our reporting is integrated between finance and the budget office, and making those types of changes will, affect the integrity of that reporting. So what we say is that if you've had a fund and there's been activity, if it's in the same period, like you set it up today, you change it tomorrow, it's all fine. We didn't report on anything yet. It's still this period. But if it was last month to this month, we're usually going to have you set up a new account instead. If there's nothing in it, that's okay. But if you've had stuff, that's that whole reporting then, yeah. Okay, so I don't know what time it is. That was a half hour, right? Okay, so 2 things I wanted to talk about: identifying the attributes, explaining how your transactions figure into reporting. Some resources that we have on the web. Okay, so this first one, Fiscal Officer Resources, if you start there, you can spend days. I mean, literally, there's a whole lot of stuff in there. We got stuff on UC Funds where you drill down on each type of fund. It's got restrictions. It's got just a wealth of information that's out there. So, I mean, if you have a new person coming into the department and they're new to finance at the university, this will be a good spot for them to kind of learn some things. And then we got some information on object codes. And as Laura pointed out this morning when she went over the website, if you can't find something on the website, use that nifty search field. I work in accounting, and sometimes I don't use these things all the time, so I use a search field, and I can find things pretty quickly that way. Okay, so any questions on stuff that I've covered? I also have like a wealth of people here from accounting and finance, so if I don't know the answer, somebody here will. No questions? Yes. Project code, comment? Right. 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 Very good point. And I meant to make that point, but I did not. So the comment is that when you have a project, one of the benefits of having that project is that it's not tied to an account like, say, the sub-account is, or the sub-object can be tied to an account. The project can cross accounts. So if you have multiple funding sources for something that you have going on and you want to pull all those together, you can set up a project and then it pulls all that stuff together for you.